What happens when Hollywood royalty meets late-night television's most notorious host? You won't believe what unfolds when a simple interview turns into an all-out verbal warfare that left audiences stunned and one guest storming off set in absolute fury. Last night's episode of The Late Show delivered the most explosive confrontation in recent television history, and the fallout is already sending shockwaves through social media. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Theatre stage. What started as typical late-night banter quickly devolved into something far more sinister, with Colbert's signature smirk taking on an entirely different meaning as the night progressed. Sources backstage reported an unusual energy in the air, with production staff whispering about last-minute script changes and the host's increasingly aggressive pre-show demeanor. Meghan, dressed in an elegant navy blazer and appearing composed despite recent media scrutiny, settled into the guest chair with the grace expected of someone who had navigated both Hollywood and royal protocols. The audience welcomed her with enthusiastic applause, completely unaware they were about to witness television history in the making. Colbert's opening seemed standard enough, his trademark theatrical delivery masking what would soon reveal itself as carefully calculated malice. Well, Colbert began, his voice carrying that familiar mock-serious tone that had made him famous. We have actual royalty in the house tonight? Or should I say former royalty? The audience chuckled nervously, sensing something different in his delivery. Meghan's smile remained fixed, but those watching closely could see her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. I have to ask, Meghan, how does it feel to go from suits to suits of armor, and then back to, well, suits again? The question hung in the air longer than it should have, and Meghan's response was measured but pointed. Stephen, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about my journey and what it means to serve others, whether that's through entertainment, humanitarian work, or yes, even within an institution as complex as the monarchy. Her voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the silk. I've always been committed to using whatever platform I have to make a positive difference. Colbert leaned back in his chair, that infamous smirk spreading across his face like a predator sensing weakness. Right. The platform. Speaking of platforms, yours has certainly been controversial, hasn't it? I mean, between the Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the podcast that got canceled, some people might say you've been working your platform pretty hard. The audience shifted uncomfortably, the energy in the room becoming noticeably heavier. What happened next would set the tone for everything that followed. Meghan's composure began to crack, not with anger, but with the kind of controlled disappointment that somehow felt more dangerous. I'm not sure what you're implying, Stephen, but I think your audience deserves better than cheap shots disguised as comedy. Her voice carried a warning that Colbert either didn't hear or chose to ignore completely. The host's response revealed his true intentions for the evening, as he doubled down with the kind of ruthless precision that had made him both famous and infamous. Oh, I'm not implying anything, Meghan. I'm asking directly. Because frankly, a lot of people are wondering if all this advocacy work is genuine concern or just really expensive public relations. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by a few uncomfortable coughs from the audience. Meghan's hands, which had been resting gracefully in her lap, slowly clenched into fists as she processed what had just been said on national television. The woman who had faced down tabloid harassment and institutional racism was now confronting something perhaps even more insidious, a host who seemed determined to humiliate her under the guise of entertainment. The battle lines were drawn, and neither side seemed prepared to back down. But this was only the beginning of what would become the most talked-about late-night disaster in years, as Colbert prepared to push even harder. The commercial break that followed felt like the calm before a hurricane. Backstage sources later revealed that during those crucial 3 minutes, Colbert's producers frantically tried to redirect the interview toward safer territory, but their host had other plans. When the cameras rolled again, his demeanor had shifted from playfully antagonistic to something far more calculated and cruel. "Welcome back," Colbert announced, his voice dripping with false warmth as he turned to face Meghan directly. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and we were just discussing her various career pivots. Now, Meghan, I have to ask about something that's been fascinating the American public. You married into what many consider the ultimate institution of privilege, and then you left claiming it was because of racism and lack of support. But here's what I don't understand." He paused dramatically, letting the tension build as Meghan's posture straightened defensively. The audience sat in stunned silence, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented unfold before their eyes. "If the royal family was so terrible, why did you spend so much time and energy trying to profit from that connection afterward? I mean, the timing seems awfully convenient, doesn't it?" The question hit like a physical blow. Meghan's carefully maintained composure cracked visibly as she processed what had just been said to her on national television. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a tremor of barely contained fury. "I'm sorry, Stephen, but I think you fundamentally misunderstood everything about my experience and my motivations. The suggestion that I somehow orchestrated or profited from the pain my family endured is not only wrong, it's deeply offensive." Colbert's response was swift and merciless, delivered with the kind of theatrical cruelty that would later be dissected frame by frame across social media. "Oh, come on, Meghan. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim to be victims while simultaneously signing massive media deals and doing tell-all interviews. That's not victimhood. That's a business model." The audience gasped audibly, finally understanding they were witnessing something far beyond typical late-night comedy. What happened next would be replayed endlessly across every major news outlet. Meghan stood up partially from her chair, her voice rising with controlled anger. "How dare you reduce our experience to a business transaction? We're talking about real people, real children who were affected by institutional racism, and a system that protects itself at the expense of human dignity. This isn't entertainment, Stephen. These are our lives." But Colbert wasn't finished. In what would later be described as a career-defining moment of poor judgment, he leaned forward with predatory intensity. "Right, the children. Speaking of which, how exactly do you reconcile your desire for privacy with your very public lifestyle? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want privacy when it's convenient and publicity when it pays." The studio fell into a deadly silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. Meghan's face went through a series of emotions that the cameras captured in brutal detail. Shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, something approaching disgust. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing right now. You're suggesting that I've somehow exploited my own children for financial gain? That protecting them from a toxic media environment while advocating for important causes is somehow hypocritical?" Her voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with pure, righteous anger. The host's final push would cement his reputation as someone who had crossed every line of decency and professionalism. "I'm not suggesting anything, Meghan. I'm observing that your definition of privacy seems to be rather flexible. Netflix, cameras, podcast studios, magazine covers, but heaven forbid anyone asks a legitimate question about it all." His smirk had evolved into something truly ugly, and even his most loyal audience members were beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. What followed was a moment of television that would be analyzed and debated for years to come. Meghan Markle, the woman who had faced down the British tabloid press and emerged from royal protocol battles with her dignity intact, finally reached her breaking point on live television. The explosion that followed would make headlines around the world. "You know what, Stephen?" Meghan's voice cut through the studio like a blade. her composure completely abandoned as she rose fully from her chair. "I came here tonight in good faith, believing we could have an honest conversation about important issues. Instead, you've chosen to use your platform to perpetuate the same toxic narratives that have caused real harm to real people." The force of her words seemed to physically push Colbert back in his seat, his smirk finally beginning to falter. The audience was completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something historic unfold before their eyes. Meghan continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You talk about business models and profit motives, but let me tell you what's really profitable, Stephen. It's tearing down women who dare to speak their truth. It's reducing complex human experiences to punchlines. It's exactly what you're doing right now, and frankly, it's disgusting." Colbert, perhaps realizing he had pushed too far but unable to back down without losing face entirely, made the catastrophic decision to double down one final time. "Oh, come off it, Meghan. You knew exactly what kind of show this was when you agreed to come on. If you can't handle a few tough questions without having a meltdown, maybe public life isn't for you." The cruelty in his voice was now undeniable, and even his own production team could be seen exchanging worried glances off camera. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform within hours. Meghan stepped closer to Colbert's desk, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried more power than any shout could have managed. "A meltdown? Stephen, what you're witnessing isn't a meltdown. It's a woman who has had enough of being treated like entertainment fodder by men who mistake cruelty for comedy." The host's face had gone pale, finally understanding that he had pushed someone far beyond their breaking point. But it was too late to retreat now. "Look, Meghan, I'm just doing my job here. If you don't like the questions, you're free to leave." His voice had lost all its theatrical bravado, replaced by something approaching genuine nervousness, as he realized the gravity of what was happening. Meghan's laugh was bitter and sharp, cutting through the tension like glass. "Your job? Your job is supposed to be entertaining people, bringing them joy, maybe even informing them about important issues. Instead, you've chosen to use your platform to bully and humiliate your guests. Is that really the legacy you want, Stephen? Is that what you want to be remembered for?" The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, with both participants now standing and facing each other across the desk that had become a battleground. Colbert, perhaps sensing that his career was hanging in the balance, made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "You know what, Meghan? I think you've made your point. Maybe we should take another break and—" But Meghan wasn't finished. Years of suppressed anger at media treatment, institutional gaslighting, and public humiliation poured out in a torrent of righteous fury. "No, Stephen. You don't get to decide when this conversation ends. You started this, and now you're going to hear what I have to say." Her voice carried the authority that seemed to fill the entire studio, commanding attention in a way that left no room for interruption. "You want to talk about business models? Let's talk about yours. You make millions of dollars every year by mocking people who can't fight back, by reducing human suffering to comedy bits, by treating your guests like props in your little theater of cruelty. And tonight, you crossed a line that you can never uncross." Her words hit like physical blows, each one calculated to maximum impact. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, many visibly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing but unable to look away. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something raw and real and deeply unsettling. Colbert's usual arsenal of jokes and deflections had been completely neutralized by the sheer force of Meghan's anger and the undeniable truth of her words. "I've spent years being told to stay quiet, to take the high road, to turn the other cheek while people like you profit from tearing me down," Meghan continued, her voice now carrying a prophetic quality that seemed to echo through the theater. "Well, I'm done with that. I'm done pretending that what you do is harmless entertainment when it's actually systematic destruction of human dignity for profit. The moment that would define both their careers was approaching rapidly, as Meghan prepared to deliver the final blow that would leave Colbert's reputation in ruins. "You want to know what the real tragedy is here, Stephen." Meghan's voice had taken on an almost otherworldly quality, filled with the kind of moral authority that comes from someone who has endured years of systematic abuse and finally found their voice. "It's that you had the opportunity tonight to have a meaningful conversation about issues that actually matter. Mental health, racism, the responsibility of media platforms, the protection of children from predatory coverage. Instead, you chose this." She gestured around the studio with disgust, her eyes never leaving Colbert's increasingly pale face. "You chose to turn human suffering into a punchline. You chose to attack a mother defending her children. You chose to perpetuate the same toxic cycle that has destroyed countless lives, all for the sake of cheap laughs and ratings." The words landed with devastating precision, each one calculated to expose the moral bankruptcy of what had transpired. Colbert made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation, his voice barely above a whisper. "Meghan, look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we start over and—" But his words died in his throat as Meghan raised her hand, the gesture carrying such authority that the entire studio fell into complete silence. "No, Stephen. There is no starting over from this. You've shown your audience and the world exactly who you are tonight. You've demonstrated that when given the choice between lifting people up and tearing them down, you will choose destruction. Every single time." Her voice carried the weight of absolute finality, like a judge delivering a verdict that could never be appealed. The cameras captured every nuance of what happened next, as Meghan began removing her microphone with deliberate, controlled movements. "I came here tonight hoping to discuss my work with organizations supporting military families, mental health advocacy, and gender equality. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination disguised as entertainment." Her words echoed through the stunned studio as the reality of the situation began to sink in for everyone present. "You know what's truly pathetic, Stephen?" Meghan continued as she placed the microphone on his desk with a decisive click. "You had the chance to be part of something meaningful tonight. You could have used your platform to amplify voices that need to be heard, to discuss solutions to real problems, to actually make a difference in people's lives. Instead, you chose to be exactly what's wrong with media today." The silence that followed was deafening. Colbert sat frozen in his chair, all traces of his trademark smirk completely erased, replaced by the hollow expression of a man who had just watched his career implode in real time. The audience remained motionless, many appearing genuinely disturbed by what they had witnessed. This wasn't the playful celebrity sparring they had paid to see. This was something far more serious and unsettling. Meghan turned to address the audience directly, her voice carrying across the theater with crystalline clarity. "To everyone who came here tonight expecting entertainment, I apologize that you had to witness this. But I hope you'll remember that behind every headline, every joke, every cruel comment, there are real people with real feelings and real families who are affected by this kind of behavior." She then delivered the moment that would be replayed endlessly across social media and news outlets worldwide. Looking directly into the main camera, Meghan spoke with the kind of dignity and grace that made Colbert's behavior appear even more reprehensible by contrast. "To anyone watching who has ever been bullied, mocked, or dehumanized by people in positions of power, please know that you have worth, you have value, and you deserve to be treated with basic human decency." With that, Meghan Markle walked off the set of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, leaving behind a host whose reputation lay in shambles, and an audience that sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The sound of her heels clicking against the studio floor seemed to echo with finality as she disappeared through the backstage doors, never to return. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within hours, clips of the confrontation had gone viral across every social media platform, with overwhelming support pouring in for Meghan and widespread condemnation of Colbert's conduct. Major advertisers began pulling their sponsorships, celebrity guests canceled upcoming appearances, and calls for his removal from the show grew louder by the hour. By morning, Stephen Colbert's ratings had plummeted to historic lows. His reputation, as a beloved late-night host, forever tarnished by a single evening of cruelty that revealed his true character. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle emerged from the confrontation with her dignity intact and her voice stronger than ever, having finally said what millions of people had been thinking about the toxic nature of modern media culture. The incident would be remembered as the night when accountability finally caught up with someone who had spent years hiding behind the shield of comedy to justify inexcusable behavior, and when a woman who had endured years of abuse finally said enough.